My name is Bailey Rhodes, 26 years old. And on the night that was supposed to bring my family together, my mother looked me straight in the eye and said, "You have 48 hours to move out." For a moment, the world froze. The glow from the Christmas tree flickered across the table, casting soft light over faces I thought I knew. No one spoke. Not my father, not my sister. Just the quiet hum of the heater and the smell of roasted turkey filling the air, warm, suffocating, and painfully ironic. I stared at them, waiting for someone to laugh to say it was a cruel joke, but no one did. My mother's knife glided through the turkey as if she hadn't just shattered the last piece of peace in our home. My father took another sip of wine. My sister scrolled on her phone, pretending none of this was happening. That's when I realized something. Sometimes betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers through ordinary moments, wearing the face of family. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg for reason. I just sat there watching people who shared my blood act like strangers. Every heartbeat felt heavier than the last, echoing inside my chest. When the night ended, I walked to my room, packed my bags, and decided this would be the last time I ever dined at that table. The next morning, I left without a word, without a backward glance, leaving them the rent, utility, and tax bills I'd already stopped paying. Before we continue, share your city and the time where you are right now. I want to know how far this story about family has spread. The morning after I left that table, one thought wouldn't leave my head. How did we even get here? It wasn't always like this. There was a time when our house in Tampa was bright and easy. My father, Edward, wore his police badge with pride, and my mother, Margaret, worked part-time as a nurse at the local clinic. We weren't rich, but we had rhythm. Bills were paid, birthdays were celebrated, and dinner meant laughter instead of silence. Then Dad retired early after a back injury, and everything changed. The pension was small, the medical bills weren't. Mom picked up extra shifts, but her smile grew thinner each month. I had just started my first real job as a junior accountant, still learning how to file my own taxes when I began helping them out first, with groceries, then utilities, then the mortgage. It felt natural. That's what good daughters do. At 21, I thought money was the easiest way to show love. Every time I sent part of my paycheck home, Mom would say, "You're such a blessing, Bailey." And I believed her. I didn't realize that helping out would soon turn into holding everything together. Hannah, my older sister, had been drifting for years. She quit her marketing job because, as she said, she needed time to find her passion. That passion turned out to be yoga retreats and online shopping. She moved back home claiming it was temporary. It wasn't. Within months, she was living entirely off the household I paid for. When I brought it up once, Dad sighed, saying, "She's just figuring things out." "Don't be so harsh," Mom added softly. "You've always been the responsible one, Bailey. You understand." That sentence, "you understand," became a leash around my neck. It excused everything. Then there was Lydia, my youngest sister, barely 19 and still in college. She was bright, hopeful, and too afraid to ask for help. So I offered before she could. I paid for her tuition, her textbooks, even the used car she needed to get to class. I didn't tell anyone. I wanted her to have a chance I never did, to start life without the weight of debt. Month after month, my salary disappeared into their hands. I'd tell myself, just until Dad's pension increases, or until Mom's overtime kicks in, or until Hannah finds a job. Those untils never came. By the third year, I was the only person in the family with steady income, and the only one pretending everything was fine. Mom stopped working nights, saying her back couldn't handle it. Dad spent afternoons fixing the fence, then napping on the couch. Hannah's temporary stay stretched on her voice, filling the house with complaints about how difficult the world was. Lydia stayed quiet, caught between gratitude and guilt. The house that once felt like a home turned into an account I couldn't close. I was paying for comfort I never received. Sometimes I'd come home from work and see the lights on in every room, the TV blaring, empty takeout boxes on the counter. I'd feel exhaustion not from work, but from knowing I'd clean it up because no one else would. Once, when I hinted that maybe everyone should pitch in, Mom frowned as if I'd insulted her. Family doesn't keep score, sweetheart. I wanted to say, then why do I feel like the only one losing, but I swallowed it. Dad began calling me our little provider as if it were a joke. Hannah rolled her eyes when I talked about saving for my own apartment. Oh please, you'd miss us in a week, she'd say, laughing. But I didn't laugh, because deep down I knew she was wrong. I wasn't afraid of missing them. I was afraid of realizing I didn't need them. Nights blurred into years. My paychecks came and went like tides, leaving me dry and proud at once. Every small act of giving felt noble, but also empty. I convinced myself this was love, that sacrifice made me good. It took me far too long to understand the truth. I wasn't helping a family anymore. I was funding a habit. Days bled together until one evening I caught myself unlocking the front door and feeling like a guest. By then, home felt like a rental I could never leave. Every corner of the house carried my paycheck, yet somehow none of it felt mine. The walls echoed with the voices of others, and my name existed only when something needed to be fixed or paid for. Mom had developed a habit of reminding me to be grateful. You should be thankful you have a place like this, she'd say, while folding laundry I'd bought with detergent I'd paid for. Not everyone gets to live under a roof surrounded by family. I wanted to reply that family wasn't what surrounded me anymore. It was responsibility, but I bit my tongue. Gratitude had become a one-way transaction. Hannah, of course, always found a way to turn my efforts into a punchline. You really think money buys respect, little sister, she'd tease. Reclining on the couch, I'd financed her nails freshly done. She'd say it with a grin that wasn't cruel enough to start a fight, but sharp enough to draw blood. I'd keep my voice steady sometimes, choosing silence over the exhaustion of explaining myself. The more I gave, the smaller I felt inside my own home. Dad stayed mostly out of it. He'd glance up from the TV sigh and mutter something about letting women sort their issues. He preferred comfort to confrontation. The remote in his hand was more familiar than the idea of taking a side. To him, peace meant pretending nothing was wrong. Each evening followed a pattern: Hannah lounging in the living room, Mom complaining about bills as if she wasn't holding my debit card, Dad quietly checking the sports channel. I moved around like a ghost, paying for everything, belonging nowhere. The house smelled of warm meals I bought but rarely ate, of perfume that wasn't mine, and of resentment that wasn't theirs to feel. Sometimes Mom would make little remarks while I worked late at the kitchen table. You know, Bailey, when I was your age, I didn't have someone taking care of me. Her tone carried pride, but also accusation. I wanted to ask why she couldn't see that I wasn't being taken care of. I was the caretaker. But arguing felt pointless. In this house, logic never beat guilt. One night when the air conditioning broke down, I called a repair service without asking anyone. The next morning, I found Mom on the phone telling her friend, "Oh yes, we got it fixed. Edward handled it." I stood there invisible again. It wasn't about credit, it was about erasure. My work was only visible when it failed. There were moments when I thought about moving out, but guilt whispered louder than reason. They need me, I'd tell myself, even as Hannah joked about our little ATM. Lydia tried to defend me once, saying Bailey works hard for all of us. Mom immediately corrected her. She works for herself, sweetheart. We all contribute in our own ways. I remember Lydia falling silent, realizing that truth had no room in that conversation. The imbalance became a rhythm. My schedule revolved around their needs: rent payments, grocery, runs, emergencies. Their lives moved freely while mine was pinned under expectation. At night, I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock, and sometimes the faint laughter from Hannah's room. It sounded like a celebration I wasn't invited to. The breaking point came quietly. One afternoon, after paying another overdue electric bill, I walked into the kitchen where Mom and Hannah were talking about redecorating the living room. I mentioned almost casually, maybe everyone could chip in for the next month's utilities. The room fell silent. Mom froze, then turned to me with a look I'd seen before, a mix of pity and disappointment. Bailey, she said, her voice sweet, but sharp. Families don't keep score. That's not how love works. I stared at her, trying to find the logic in her words. Hannah smirked, stirring her coffee like she'd just witnessed a lesson being taught. My throat tightened. I wanted to ask why love always seemed to cost me the most, but the answer was already written across their faces. They didn't see imbalance. They saw order, the kind that kept me at the bottom, holding everything up. That evening, I sat alone on the porch while the sun slipped behind the neighbors' roofs. I could hear laughter from inside, the same laughter that used to make me smile. But now it only reminded me how foreign it felt. The house glowed warmly from the outside, the kind of glow people mistake for happiness. Inside, I was slowly disappearing into the wallpaper. Money had made me indispensable but never respected. Every favor became expected, every effort invisible. Gratitude was demanded, never given. I kept trying to convince myself that things would even out someday, that once they understood, they'd finally treat me as part of the family again. But deep down, I knew the truth that silence couldn't hide anymore. Bailey realized fairness had never existed in that house. That Christmas night, I hoped for peace. The table shimmered with candlelight, the turkey glistening in the center, Lydia chatting cheerfully about her classes. For a brief moment, I believed we could pretend to be the family we once were. Even Hannah laughed, her glass of wine reflecting the soft gold of the lights. But peace in my family never lasted long. Mom carved the turkey carefully, smiling that rehearsed holiday smile. "This year's been hard," she began, her voice calm, almost gentle. "But we're together, and that's what matters." I nodded, forcing a smile of my own. Then she added, "And since we're together, there's something we should talk about." The knife stopped mid-cut. "Hannah's had a rough few months," she continued. "She fell behind on her credit cards, $22,000. The interest alone is impossible. We thought maybe you could help her out, Bailey." For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. The warmth of the candles felt like it turned to fire beneath my skin. "You want me to pay her debt?" I asked quietly. Hannah didn't even look embarrassed. She sipped her wine and shrugged. "You make the most money, don't you? It's not like you can't afford it." I felt the room tilt. The silverware gleamed under the lights. Every sound seemed too loud, every breath too shallow. "I've been paying for this house, for everything in it," I said slowly. "I can't keep fixing everyone's mistakes." Mom's smile vanished. "Don't be dramatic," she replied. "You know we always support each other. It's family." Dad cleared his throat, the tone in his voice colder than I'd ever heard. "Your sister's drowning, Bailey. What's a few more checks to write? You've always been responsible. This is your duty." The word duty cut deeper than any accusation. "I've done my duty," I said, my voice shaking. "And I'm tired of being punished for it." Hannah leaned back in her chair, lips curling. "There it is," she said softly. "The martyr act. You just love reminding everyone how much you do. Maybe it's not about helping anymore. Maybe you just want control." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Control," I repeated. "You think I want control? I wanted balance. Respect. Maybe even gratitude." Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. "Enough. You've changed, Bailey. You used to be generous. Now you're selfish and ungrateful." Something inside me snapped, not in anger but in realization. I looked at each of them, faces I'd once known better than my own. "I'm not ungrateful," I said softly. "I'm just done being used." For a second, no one spoke. The candles flickered. Then Dad slammed his hand against the table. "Watch your tone," he barked. "We raised you better than this. We taught you to take care of family." "No," I said. "You taught me to carry you." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her voice was ice when she spoke. "You have 48 hours to move out." The sentence didn't sound real. Lydia gasped. Hannah hid a smirk behind her wineglass. I sat still, feeling something inside me untangle at last. The pain wasn't loud, it was quiet, like relief disguised as heartbreak. I rose from my chair slowly. "You just made it easier," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled as I placed my napkin on the table. No one stopped me. I turned and walked down the hallway, my steps echoing softly against the hardwood floor. Behind me, the clinking of silverware began again, mechanical, detached, like nothing had happened. The laughter didn't return this time. Only the sound of knives and forks scraping against porcelain filled the room, a metallic rhythm marking the moment our family broke for good. The next morning, the house felt hollow. The Christmas lights still blinked weakly across the living room, but their glow only made the silence look deeper. I woke before sunrise, not because of rest, but because my body had learned to move before emotion could catch up. My room was cold. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on the blanket I wouldn't be folding again. Then I stood open the closet and started packing. Every sound was sharp, the scrape of a hanger, the whisper of fabric, the metallic rasp of a zipper. It felt like the house was listening. I didn't rush. There was a strange calm in knowing that I was finally doing something for myself. Each item went into the suitcase with a kind of ceremony. Shirts, shoes, a framed photo I hesitated over before slipping face down between two sweaters. The walls had watched me grow up, break down, and build everyone else's comfort. Now they watched me leave it behind. When I stepped into the hallway, the air smelled faintly of coffee and leftover turkey. The house still held the illusion of normalcy, as if last night hadn't shattered it. I moved quietly, my socks silent against the floorboards. As I reached for the last box, I heard a small knock. Lydia stood in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. She was still in her pajamas, arms crossed over her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. "You're really going," she said softly. "I have to," I replied. She nodded, then whispered, "I wanted to say something last night. I should have said something." I looked at her, the youngest, the one who'd never asked for anything. "It wouldn't have changed them," I said gently. Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom said you'll come back when things calm down." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess I'll see you in another lifetime." She stepped forward and hugged me tightly. It surprised me how fragile she felt. For years, I'd carried this family without realizing who was quietly breaking under the same weight. I pressed my chin to her shoulder and said, "Don't become them, Lydia. Please." Her voice cracked. "I won't." When she left the doorway, I placed my keys on the dresser. There was a kind of freedom in not having to hold on to them anymore. Downstairs, the kitchen looked almost peaceful. The dishes from last night were gone, the table reset like nothing had happened. I pulled a thick envelope from my bag and set it on the counter. Inside were the final bills, rent, utilities, taxes, all stamped unpaid. I'd canceled every automatic payment an hour earlier. For the first time in years, their comfort wouldn't depend on me. I stood there for a moment, my hand resting on the counter I'd scrubbed 100 times, feeling the cold surface beneath my palm. Then I turned toward the window. The sun was rising, bleeding pale gold through the frost. It made everything look cleaner, even the house that had never truly been mine. As I picked up my suitcase, a floorboard creaked behind me. Mom stood in the doorway, still in her robe, hair messy from sleep. She looked older than I remembered. "We'll talk later," she said, voice tight, but measured, like she still believed she could control the narrative. I paused. "There's nothing left to say. Bailey," she said softer now, almost pleading, "you'll regret this." I met her eyes. "Maybe. But I'll regret staying more." For a long second, neither of us moved. Then she looked away, arms folding across her chest like she needed protection from the quiet. I turned back to the door, picked up my coat, and opened it. The cold air rushed in sharp and honest. It stung, but it felt like truth. Behind me, Mom muttered something I didn't catch. It didn't matter. On my way out, I stopped in the hallway and took one last look. The photos on the wall, vacations, birthdays, the illusion of unity stared back like witnesses. I'd spent my whole life trying to keep those frames from falling apart. Now I realized they'd been crooked all along. I stepped outside. The driveway was covered in a thin layer of frost each step, leaving a mark that glimmered briefly before fading. My car waited at the curb, a small ordinary thing that had suddenly become my escape. I placed the suitcase in the trunk and stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet. From the open window upstairs, I saw Lydia watching. She didn't wave, just held my gaze, her expression steady and sad. I nodded once, and she nodded back. It was enough. I got into the car, started the engine, and let it idle for a few seconds. The air vents coughed out a weak gust of heat. The radio came on automatically, some old holiday song still playing across town. It sounded hollow, like it belonged to another world. As I pulled away from the house, I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The past didn't need witnesses anymore. The house grew smaller in the distance, its windows reflecting the pale morning light, empty, cold, familiar. For the first time in years, I didn't feel responsible for holding anything together. The road ahead was quiet, and so was I. Silence had never felt so loud. Freedom smelled like salt and rain. The air in Tampa felt heavier, wetter, alive, in a way Cleveland never did. When I stepped out of my car that first morning, the wind from the bay tangled my hair and filled my lungs with something that felt like forgiveness. I had driven 12 hours straight, the car packed with everything I owned, mostly boxes, a few clothes, and a quiet determination to rebuild from nothing. The small apartment I'd rented sat on a narrow street that led straight to the water. It wasn't much, a one-bedroom with peeling paint, humming pipes, and a window that didn't close all the way. But to me, it was the first place that didn't echo someone else's rules. For the first week, I stayed with Melissa, my old college friend, who'd escaped our hometown years ago. She greeted me with open arms and the smell of coffee. "You made it," she said, grinning. "Barely," I replied, my voice hoarse from the road. "You're here," she said, handing me a mug. "That's what matters. Now start over." Those words stuck with me, start over. I repeated them in my head as I unpacked during the following days. The apartment came alive piece by piece. First a mattress on the floor, then second-hand curtains fluttering with the sea breeze, then a small table I found at a thrift store. I paid my first month's rent with my own card and smiled when the receipt printed out. For the first time, every dollar I spent went toward my life, not someone else's comfort. I bought groceries for one, a carton of eggs, a loaf of bread, a small bag of coffee. Standing at the counter frying an egg, I realized I didn't have to rush anymore. No one was waiting for me. No one was taking from me. The loneliness that once scared me now felt like peace, wearing a new face. On the third day, I bought a desk, simple light wood, smooth to the touch. Setting it up took me hours, not because it was difficult, but because I wanted it perfect. It became the center of my new world. On top of it, I placed a small plant, its leaves bright and stubborn. I didn't even know what kind it was. "You'll do fine here," I said softly to it, half smiling. In the evenings, I walked to the bay where the water reflected the pink glow of sunset. Children laughed near the docks, old couples fed gulls on benches. I liked how the world kept moving, steady, indifferent, beautiful. The wind smelled of brine and possibility. Melissa visited on Friday with takeout boxes and a cheap bottle of wine, so she said, settling on the floor beside me, "How does freedom taste?" I laughed. "Expensive," I said, "but worth every cent." We clinked glasses. "You'll be fine," she told me. "You've always been the one holding everyone else together. Now it's your turn." Her words sank deep. For years, I had been the glue holding a house that never truly wanted me. Now I didn't need to hold anything but myself. That night, the rain began soft at first, then steady, tapping against the window like fingertips reminding me I wasn't alone. I turned off the lights and lay in bed listening. Tampa rain sounded different. It wasn't gray or heavy like back home. It was clean. It washed away things I didn't know I still carried. I thought about my past without bitterness, about my family without anger. They felt distant now, like characters from a book I'd already finished. The ache that used to live in my chest had softened into something gentler acceptance. Outside the city hummed with life cars, waves thunder, rolling faintly over the bay, and for once, it didn't overwhelm me. I breathed deeply, the air cool and damp, the room glowing with reflections from the streetlights. As I closed my eyes, I realized I didn't miss the noise of the old house or the weight of keeping it together. Tampa didn't ask me to carry anyone. It only asked me to live. And I did. I was finally living, not just surviving. Trouble always finds its way back. That morning, my phone buzzed 3 times before I finally glanced at the screen. Mom. I watched it ring until it stopped. A minute later, it started again. Her voice message came through soft, sugary, but tight at the edges. Bailey, sweetheart, we just wanted to talk. Call us okay, I didn't. I made coffee instead, the steam curling against the window, pretending the world outside my apartment was wider than the one I'd left behind. By afternoon, the sky turned gray. Thunder rolled faintly over the bay. I thought it was just another storm until someone knocked. 3 sharp hits, too heavy, too familiar. My stomach sank. Through the peephole, I saw them. Mom, Dad, and Hannah stood in the hallway, soaked from the drizzle. My heart raced, but my hand still turned the lock. What are you doing here? I asked, voice flat. Mom's smile was tight rehearsed. We were in the area, she lied. Can we come in? Before I could answer, they stepped inside. The air changed instantly. Warmth drained from the room. Dad looked around, unimpressed. Small place, he muttered. Hannah stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes swollen. Mom began. We've had some problems back home. She paused, scanning my face for sympathy that wasn't there. The landlord cut off power. Said we missed 2 months' rent. Your father's been trying to talk to him, but he's being unreasonable. I said nothing. She went on. We just need a little help just this once. You're doing well here, right? My jaw clenched. How much, I asked. 23,000, Dad answered before she could. It'll cover the bills, and Hannah's her credit cards I finished for him. Silence. Dad's face tightened. Family helps family, he said sharply. You've got savings. You owe us at least that much after everything we did for you. The words hit like cold water. I laughed softly, not from humor, but disbelief. Everything you did for me? Mom stepped forward, voice trembling. Bailey, please. We're struggling. I know you're angry, but we're still your family. You taught me that love means debt, I said quietly. I'm done paying. Hannah sniffed, her voice cracking. Please, Bailey. It's not my fault. I didn't ask for. You didn't stop asking either, I cut in. Every time I helped, you wanted more. I kept waiting for someone to say thank you, but all I got was silence until you needed me again. Dad's temper flared. Watch your tone, he barked. We didn't raise you to talk to your parents like that. I met his eyes. You didn't raise me at all. You just drained me. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already done. I walked to the door, held it open. You should go. Mom's voice broke. You'll regret this. Maybe, I said. But at least it'll be my regret, not yours. Hannah's tears fell freely now. Please, can't we just start over? I shook my head. I did. You didn't. They stood there for a moment, 3 people who once defined my world. Now strangers I barely recognized. Then Mom sighed, whispered, Let's go. Dad hesitated, then followed. Hannah turned last, her face a blur of guilt and fear. I didn't move until the hallway went silent again. I locked the door, leaned my forehead against the wood, and let out a long breath. Outside, the rain picked up, pattering against the window like applause for a decision too long delayed. For the first time, I didn't feel guilt. Just space, clean, quiet, and mine. The kind of silence that used to frighten me now felt like proof of freedom. I made another cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on one by one. The storm outside kept raging, but inside it was calm. I knew this peace would last, Not because they were gone, but because I finally meant it when I closed that door. Months passed before their names stopped appearing on my phone. At first, I'd still glance at the screen when it buzzed, a small part of me hoping for something different, a message that wasn't about guilt or money. But silence, I learned, could be a form of healing too. One afternoon, Melissa came by with takeout and an envelope. "Your sister sent this," she said. My hands froze. Which one, I asked, though I already knew. Lydia. The only one who hadn't come to my door that day. I waited until she left to open it. Inside was a short letter written in Lydia's careful handwriting. "Bailey," it began. "I wanted to thank you. You were the only one who ever told me the truth, even when it hurt. I used to think love meant giving up everything for others, but you showed me it's supposed to make you feel safe. I finally understand that love isn't debt, it's respect. I'm working 2 jobs now. It's hard, but I feel free. I hope you're happy where you are." I read those lines 3 times, the ink slightly smudged near her signature, as if she'd cried while writing. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of relief. Someone had understood. The chain had broken somewhere. Later that week, I heard from an old neighbor back home. Word travels fast in small towns. Mom and Dad had lost the house. The bank repossessed it after months of missed payments. They'd moved into a relative's basement, too proud to ask anyone else for help. Hannah apparently was still drowning in debt. Her car had been taken back after she defaulted. I didn't feel joy in hearing it. Just distance, like reading about strangers whose names happened to match my family's. Sometimes I wondered if they blamed me. Sometimes I wondered if they finally saw the truth. But those thoughts didn't linger long. Life in Tampa had a way of reminding me to stay present. The sunset still painted the bay gold, and the air still smelled of salt and possibility. I often sat on my small balcony with coffee, the same one I'd bought on my first day here, watching the waves move with patient rhythm. I thought about how long I had lived on survival mode, how exhaustion had become routine, and how quiet strength now filled its place. I whispered to myself almost like a prayer, family should be a home, not alone. For the first time, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded true. I folded Lydia's letter, neatly placed it in the drawer beside my desk, and turned toward the window where the last light of the day shimmered. The world outside felt both new and familiar, like breathing after years underwater. I had finally surfaced. I looked out at the horizon and smiled. "Thank you for listening to my story," I whispered, imagining the faces of strangers who might hear it one day. "If you've ever had to choose between peace and family, tell me, what would you have done in my place?"